Welcome to the Lida Citroën Podcast, your space to grow your influence and elevate your personal brand. In each episode, you'll hear inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical strategies to help you stand out, lift up others, and leave your mark on your team, your community, or the world. If you're ready to make your voice heard, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Lida Citroën Podcast. I am so thrilled with how your response has been to these podcasts. I got to say, I check the numbers. I look for comments. I get your emails and your direct messages on LinkedIn. And it really warms my heart to know that this platform is really working. I've written books my whole life, but I've never done a podcast of my own. So to know that it's working is so cool. Thank you for that. If this is your first time with us, welcome. I think today's conversation is certainly going to give you some insights and practical tools to start using right away. And if you've been with us before, welcome back. Really happy that you came back to hear more about how to build influence, how to set yourself apart, and really how to define your voice and value in a really crowded marketplace. Today, we're going to be talking about not you, but the people who matter to you, right? So it's personal branding and influence building is very much about what you do and how you show up and how you communicate, but it's also about the relationships you have, right? So it's how you speak, it's how you act, and who you know. And knowing the right people, having key stakeholders who will vouch for you, who will talk about you when you're not in the room positively, who will support you, cheer you on, and make decisions in your favor. Those are our key stakeholders. And we're going to be talking today about how do you engineer trust, form relationship, identify who they are, and be seen in the right room. So I want to kind of back up a little bit before we get to that. And there's this paradox going on right now of thinking about hard work. And I ran something on social media recently, which really, I think, tickled some people, but also made a lot of people a little pause, right? People paused because it used to be that if we did hard work, if we showed up on time and delivered on budget and met the goals, that rewards would come, right? And the hard work was the outcome or the output, not necessarily the result. And I'm reminded of a conversation I had when I started my business with someone who was going to design my business cards. And we had worked very carefully on the layout of the business cards, the paper quality, the print quality, everything. We had had so many back and forth conversations. And when it came to approving before going to print, I felt pretty confident that we were going to have what I was looking for. And it was my new business. So I felt really invested in this and it mattered to me. And the cards arrived and they weren't what I was expecting. They were completely different. And I went back and I looked at what I had signed off on and I didn't understand what had happened. And so I called the person who I was working with and I said, what's going on? These are not what we talked about. And I remember their reaction was, well, they might not be what you were hoping for, but could they just work? I mean, I worked really hard on these and I think they're fine. And I said, yeah, but they weren't what I wanted. The paper quality is different. The print is not what I signed off on. And he kept going back with, but I put so much time into this. I worked so hard on this. Like that was his sort of counterpoint to what I was saying. And it was so frustrating. I don't even remember how we resolved it, but I just remember it stayed in my mind that that's what he was holding on to. And, today, especially, it's not about just putting in the effort. And I talk to people every once in a while who will say that's one of their key values is hard work. And so I'll ask them and I'll say, well, if something comes easy to you, then does it matter as much? And they'll say, no. Interesting. So if this shift is happening, right? And it's not just about doing the work, then what is it about? And I will say in my research, in my work, it is about having the right people notice that work. It is about being seen in the right places by the right people. That's what makes the difference, because the hard work gets you into the building, but the influence, the visibility, the relationships with those stakeholders is what gets you into the room and gets you a seat at the table in the room. So it's important to recognize, and I'm certainly not advocating for taking shortcuts or doing things fast, but we need to shift our focus from the effort is the value to the output, and the output in front of the right people, because there's also this visibility trap or blind spot that we fall into, which is, if you're known by a lot of people, but you're not known to be influential by a few, your career can stall. So it's really important that we think strategically about how we show up. There's another blind spot that I recently uncovered, and this is this idea that if you work really hard and that's where you put your value, right? I show up on time, I do the work, I'm able to work independently, I can go away in isolation and get things done, and you're known for being reliable and hardworking, that can actually limit your career growth. Think about that for a second. It can make your boss think, I don't know that I want to move that person out of that role, because what if the person that backfills that doesn't work as hard or doesn't offer as much value? So there's this shift happening to looking at the output, looking at the result. We talk about on your resume, on your LinkedIn, quantify, add metrics, talk about the result of the task, not just that you know how to do the task. And that's where I think when we think about influence as a soft skill, it really is a much more strategic approach to how you look at your career. So let's talk about this idea of stakeholders. All of us have stakeholders. There are people who can make or break the opportunities that come to us. So I want you to think about first, who is in your inner circle? Like, you might know thousands and thousands of people, but who are the people that you could call or text or show up at their office, and they would meet with you? They would take your call. They would respond to your text. Who are the people who matter? Because it's not just about being known to everyone, right? You can have 100,000 followers on social media. That doesn't mean 100,000 people are going to want to help you, are going to be thinking of ideas for you, are going to be advocating for you when you're in the room, when you're not in the room. So it's about being indispensable to a few people. So take this idea of sort of, I want to be known and liked by everyone. And we're going to go back to the like comment in a moment, and really think about who is in your inner circle. Then think about who fits different categories. When I talk about target audiences or key stakeholders in terms of marketing, right? Marketing your personal brand, building your influence. We think about the different roles that people play in that inner circle. And they can cross over, they can move from one role to another, but they fit specific roles that help us, right? It's a key part of networking. You have to know who you're going to network with. So for instance, you're going to have decision makers, people who can actually say yes. They can promote you. They can hire you. They have the power, the authority, the influence themselves to say yes to something. Those are decision makers. You have influencers, or people who have the ear of the decision maker, people who they respect, people who they listen to, people who can vouch for you and offer that social proof of who you are and what you offer. They're gatekeepers, right? I've shared some great stories of people who, if you can't get to the decision maker because of a gatekeeper, you're kind of stuck. And there are great stories of people who, find ways to network and build relationship with people who have the ear, have access to the decision maker, the person who can say yes. And these are the people who control information, the flow of information. Thought leadership is often targeted at the decision maker, but it maybe should be targeted at the gatekeepers. Because how many times has a gatekeeper brought something to a decision maker's attention that they otherwise might have missed that's really important? We have information sources, people who we should have relationship with, people who we should have in our network, people who should know us, who have really cool information that helps us. And I'll give you a quick story that I sometimes share when I talk about networking. Years ago, I went to an event and I always typically, because I'm such an extrovert, I will look for people who look terrified to be there. So I went into this event. It was some kind of a business networking social thing. And I saw in the back of the room this gentleman standing at one of those high top cocktail tables. And he was just like had a death grip on the table. He looked absolutely horrified to be there. And I approached him. I didn't overwhelm him. I didn't scare him. Don't worry. But I approached him and we just started a casual conversation. And it turned out he was really interesting. He was a researcher in some aspect of nanotechnology. And I don't know much about science, but he explained to me that nanotechnology is like really tiny things. And it was just really interesting because he knew that basically I was starting at zero with my knowledge and he informed me and it was fun. And he felt grateful that somebody was talking to him. I really enjoyed the conversation. And, from that event, we connected on LinkedIn. We emailed a couple times. I would see him at other events and maybe introduce him to someone. Really, that was the extent of my networking with him. But he was somebody who was an information source to me. If I needed information about nanotechnology, he was my go-to. Well, then I did. I had an opportunity to do a proposal to pitch a branding project for the leader of a fabric company. And the fabric company, the textile company, actually based a lot of their materials on nanotechnology and some of the influences. Well, I don't know anything about science, but I know someone who does. And because I'd curated that relationship and kept this researcher in my network, and he was somebody important to my inner circle, I could pick up the phone. He took my call. He was so excited to have me ask the questions. And he literally, in about a 30-minute conversation, told me about their competitors, about how the product had evolved, where the technology was heading. So much competitive advantage that I would have taken me hours and hours and hours to pull together. We didn't have AI back then. This was a few years ago. So my point is, he may not look like someone who you would ideally go after as a person for your inner circle. Not a decision maker, not really an influencer, not much of a gatekeeper, but he was an information source. And I would also say a category to consider and really look for relationships with, because they are stakeholders, are going to be cheerleaders. And these people are just really positive. They're positive about you. They believe in you. They, cheer you on. They're talking you up when you're not in the room. And we're going to talk about sponsors in a moment, but they might be sponsors as well. They could be decision makers, but they could also just be really positive people. And building your strategic key influencer network is a lot of heavy lifting. And sometimes we just need that reassurance from people who think, we're the cat's meow and they're going to be happy. And that makes us feel better. And then we can kind of go at it a little more. I guess the point is, if you're thinking of your personal brand, if you're thinking of your influence as sort of a best kept secret, that's not working anymore. We can't be a best kept secret. We need all these different stakeholders, all these different types of people, decision makers, gatekeepers, information sources. We need them to know about us and know who we are, what we stand for, and what we can offer. Then we've sort of curated or built this sales force, which is out in the world, out in the market, in conversations, in rooms we don't even know about, talking about us, talking about what we can add, talking about our value. That's why this matters. They're allocating resources. They're advocating for us. They're sharing valuable insight, right? Like that researcher. And there was a study done by the Center for Talent Innovation, and it found that professionals with sponsors are 23% more likely to advance in their careers than those without. If you recall, a few episodes ago, I had a conversation with Megan Bizzuto, and we talked about mentorship. And in that conversation, we talked about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And if you haven't heard it, go listen to that conversation. It was fabulous. But sponsors aren't just people guiding you, but they are the people that it's kind of like you have planted in those conversations, and they are motivated to want to help you. So not just help you with information, but help you find the opportunities you want. That's why sponsors are so important, especially in business, especially if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're a student. You want people to be thinking about you when they hear of a project or a promotion opportunity or a hiring opportunity. That's why it really matters. So here's a practical exercise you can think about. Think about the people you know. And I don't mean the 1,500 people you're connected with on LinkedIn, but the people that you really know, the people that would take your call, the people that would respond to your text. Think about them, put them in the category of, is that person a decision maker? Are they a cheerleader? Are they an information source? Or where do they kind of fit in? Then I want you to lay a grid over that. And then look at who are primary stakeholders, who are secondary stakeholders, and who are on the peripheral. Primary stakeholders are the ones that they're hot, right? It's right there. It's not that you haven't talked to them in a while. You know these people, they trust you, you've built credibility with them, they understand your personal brand, the opportunities they have access to or the resources that they are exposed to are absolutely ideal. So that's what I mean by hot. They are the primary stakeholder of your, key stakeholder group. Secondary stakeholders are ones who may be able to amplify your visibility with the primary. So again, decision makers, information sources, all of that. But we're layering this other criteria on top. Secondary are less maybe relevant, less critical today, but they're still valuable, right? You cannot lose their trust, the visibility with them, but it may not be as timely for what you're looking to do right now. If you're looking for a promotion, your primary stakeholders are going to be your boss's boss, whoever's making that decision. A secondary stakeholder could be a manager in a department that you worked on a project with who may or may not get asked whether you'd be a good fit for that leadership opportunity. Then there are peripherals. And peripherals are just people who have more of a limited impact on your trajectory. So it doesn't mean we ignore them. It doesn't mean we don't care about what they think about us or how they perceive us. It just means that's not where our focus is. And all of this can shift. All of this can change as your needs and your growth develops. But for right now, once you've put everybody in those buckets, now layer over that who's a primary stakeholder, who's a secondary stakeholder, and maybe the rest kind of fall into that peripheral. And yeah, there's a whole mess of other people out there, right? There's a whole world out there. The point of thinking this way is that you take some of the abstract out of how you're showing up. You take some of the randomness. Should I meet that person for coffee? Should I spend time getting to know that leader in the company? And you're starting to think about it more intentionally and strategically for where you want to go in building your influence. I know it's a lot of math. I'm not a huge spreadsheet person. Ask anyone on my team. My eyes glaze over, but it does help to see it organized. It helps so you don't feel like you're wasting your time. You can measure and monitor how things are going more carefully. And it feels better from a strategic standpoint if we're organized. So I encourage you to do that. Now, once we have the primary stakeholders, we understand who the decision makers are, right? Because those are the two big groups. Then we need to really think about our relationship with them. And I want to talk about this concept of psychological safety. And in the new rules of influence, if you're watching on YouTube, hello, the book. Hope you're holding up your copy too. On page 94, I talk about, under the heading of inclusivity and the people that we need to know, when people around you feel safe, heard, and understood for who they are, where they are, and what they can offer, you've built an inclusive environment. When we are truly inclusive, we create psychological safety for those around us. This is a concept that Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School came up with. She kind of coined the term. And the idea is that when people feel safe, they're going to share their concerns and ideas. They'll take risks because they feel supported. They don't fear retribution or punishment. They feel safe emotionally. So what does that mean in terms of stakeholders? Well, every human being, you and I, no matter what corner of the planet we're living on, no matter what type of work we do, no matter whether you're running a company or you're just starting out in your career, we all have two basic sets of needs. On the one hand, we need to know stuff. I call this functional needs. We need to know things like, if I'm hiring somebody, I would need to know, can they do the job? Do they have the skills and the certifications and credentials and experience needed to do the job? Are they competent? It's sort of a check the box, right? That's why we put resumes together, because it lists out what we know how to do and what the result was. That's part of the logic. But that actually isn't where human beings, make decisions. We make decisions, we buy on the emotional side. So on one hand, we need to know stuff. That's the functional, but we need to feel something. And your target audience, your key stakeholders, all those people that you have organized into these categories need to feel something from you in order to move forward, in order to advocate for you, in order to sponsor or select you. They might need to feel something like, will I feel foolish if I back this person? Can I sleep at night if I know they're leading this project? Do I feel safe? Do I feel validated? Can this person stay calm in a crisis, right? These are feelings, these are perceptions, these are beliefs, and they're emotional. Human beings actually make decisions based on emotion. We act on logic, but we buy on how we feel. I recently went through a car buying process and I don't like it. It feels overwhelming, but it came down to two cars that, had the same features. They had roughly the same sticker price. Dealerships were roughly in my area. Everything on the functional side made sense. But the reason I went with one dealership instead of the other, with one salesperson instead of the other, is because of how that person made me feel. They responded to my messages quickly. They answered my questions without making me feel like it was a dumb question. I enjoyed their camaraderie in the conversations we had. That feeling created a buying decision for me. If you're applying for a job and all you're doing is putting a resume in front of someone, there's no feeling attached to that. They aren't hiring people on skills. They aren't hiring people on credentials and certifications. Companies and hiring managers are hiring people on how you make them feel. Are you one of us? Would you get along with the team? Are you somebody that other people would enjoy working with? Very important that we pay attention to what our target audience needs to know, right? That gets us into the room. But what they need to feel is what builds the relationship, is what makes them say yes. So there was an interesting study also included in Harvard Business Review that talked about this warmth competence model, and it maps to functional and emotional needs that I'm talking about. And they describe it as human beings judge others based on two traits. They define warmth as, are you on my side? Can I feel safe? Are you one of us, right? But competence is, can you do the work? Are you qualified? Do you have the skills? And there needs to be both, but in a case where there isn't warmth, they will start to question competence. So if I don't feel that that I can trust you, if I don't feel safe with you, if I don't feel that you will make my world better, then I will look for reasons to question whether you're actually good at your job. I thought that was interesting, because how many of us literally sell ourselves or promote our value based on what we know how to do, right? Based on what we were trained for. But that isn't what we're buying as consumers. We are buying as human beings, as executives, as leaders. We are buying the person. I often refer to there's a show that is popular in America called Shark Tank, where budding entrepreneurs go in front of investors and they will pitch a product, an invention, something that they've created. And I've had clients be on this show. Some have gotten funded. It's really cool. But what's really cool about it is there's always a case, probably in every episode, where one of the inventors, one of the entrepreneurs, the business model falls apart, the valuation falls apart, all the functional stuff, all the logic starts unraveling, and it's just not happening. And the investors, this panel of investors, will inevitably say, well, okay, let's back up from the business for a moment. Tell us why this matters to you. What's your story? Why is this important to you that this product or this idea come to market? And then they get the emotional story. They get the emotional connection. And there have been many cases where one of the investors will say, your product needs a lot of work. You've really got to retool this, but I believe in you. I want to invest in you. And there are a lot of us that are doing that on a daily basis. You might not check every box on what I need functionally, but if I believe in you, if I want to take a chance on you, if I want to invest in you, if I am feeling something that's really important to me because of you, then I want to be closer to that. So we need to think about every person that we are curating that relationship with. Every key stakeholder is going through the same process. They might not be conscious of it, but they are making decisions. What do I need to know? What do I need to feel? And our job is to make sure that we align with what they need to feel. Situational analysis, awareness, being mindful, doing research. All of those are ways you can find out what someone needs to feel. And then just listen. Listen. That car dealership, that salesperson, listened to me and quickly picked up what I needed in terms of emotional connection in order to say yes to buying a car. The people that you're around, the decision makers, the information sources, the influencers that you are around are telling you what they need to feel. Dial into that a little bit more. Stop pushing data at them. Stop telling them about how much work you put in, how hard the work was, and meet them where they are emotionally as well. And watch how things change. Your voice matters. My new book, The New Rules of Influence, shows you how to build long-lasting impact with authenticity, no tie or title required. Get your copy of the book today and start owning your voice. The last place I'd like to go in this conversation is thinking about your visibility. As you know, if you've read the book, The New Rules of Influence, or you've followed my work, visibility is critical. Because if you're in the back of the room, if you're, hold away in an office, out of sight, out of mind, it's very hard to have influence if I can't see you and I don't hear from you. So today we need to be in the right room. And the right room is both online and in person. It's not just the right physical room sometimes. Sometimes it's the right online room. So, most of us think of LinkedIn as our professional networking site, but LinkedIn is a knowledge sharing platform. And there are great opportunities for individuals at any level in the company, at any level of your career, to start building thought leadership. Think of it like a digital boardroom, right? If you're in the conversation, what kinds of things should you be talking about? What content should you be sharing? What ideas, what questions, what challenges should you be bringing up in order to be seen in the right way by the right people? Definitely make sure you're visible on LinkedIn and you're active on LinkedIn. Your boss is on LinkedIn. Your boss's boss is on LinkedIn. Your customers, your past employers, they're all on LinkedIn. And yeah, AI is messing the water a little bit, but that's even more of a reason to make sure your voice is genuine, is real, as I talk about in the book. Real voices, real curated content. Even if you have AI scrub it a little to make sure it sounds like it makes a point, that's fine. But these AI generated comments, that's not thought leadership. AI generated posts, no. Your voice is what I will attach to. Edelman's B2B Thought Leadership Impact Report recently came out, and they said that 54% of decision makers are spending an hour or more every week reading thought leadership. It directly leads them to awarding business and opportunities. People are stuck in airports. People are waiting for an appointment. People are on hold for a doctor to answer the phone, whatever it is. A lot of us will jump into LinkedIn and just kind of see what people are talking about. It doesn't mean we're dedicating an hour, every week sitting at our computer, but it's kind of like a default behavior right now. So if you're not showing up there, if you're not being present and adding content to this knowledge sharing platform, you could be missing an opportunity. And then there's the in-person room. That's the physical room. That's the room that either you're in or someone who believes in you, who is one of your stakeholders, is in. And when we have to curate those relationships. So going back to those lists that we talked about, who do you know that are decision makers, information sources, all of those categories? Who are your primary, secondary, and peripheral audience groups? How often do you get FaceTime with them? If you're not in front of them, if you're not having conversations with them, then it's very easy to forget about you when an opportunity presents, right? Maybe somebody gives notice in your company and, the bosses huddle and say, well, I don't know, do we have any internal candidates? Your name needs to pop up. And if you haven't spent time building those key relationships, they may forget about you. I had a client years ago, actually in Switzerland, who I worked with for a long time. And she was a spreadsheet person. She loved data. And she actually took this concept that we're talking about now and created this fully dynamic, interactive spreadsheet. And she tracked each of the key decision makers that she was curating a relationship with, all of her primary audiences. She layered everything on top. When she would meet with them, and she did coffee chats, she would ask for 20 to 30 minutes on their calendar just to have coffee. And she would then note what the conversation had been, if there was any follow-up, when the next time she was going to approach them, and any interactions they had had in between meetings. It was so easy for her to look at this at a glance and see where she needed to allocate more time, where she felt good, where she needed more work. So if it's a spreadsheet, make a spreadsheet. If it's Post-it notes on your wall, then do that. I have a whiteboard, actually. You can't see it, but I have a whiteboard where I track and I have columns and everything is listed out. To me, writing something down is better than putting it in a spreadsheet. That's just the way I'm wired. But what are those opportunities in your organization, in your industry, where people that are really important, that are in the decision maker primary category, are getting together? What meetings, what industry groups, what conversations? Think about where they are. And if you're not in the room, you want to be positively mentioned by someone who is. We can't be everywhere. We can't. It's physically not possible. But if we build those relationships, if we're intentional and strategic about those relationships, those people are going out into the world and they are carrying our flag with them. They are talking about us in the right way to the people who may decide there's an opportunity that we fit for. That's that intentional alignment that builds influence. It grows your voice. It's a pass along quality. It's where your unique value and your stakeholder needs intersect. And it is so cool when you see it happening. When you get a call from someone who says, "Yeah, I was at lunch the other day and Bob mentioned that you're someone who's really knowledgeable about this and has some great insights that might be worth listening to." Like, wow. I mean, you weren't even there. Maybe your ears were burning. That's an old wives' tale that when people talk about you, your ears burn. Anyway, um, but you want people talking about you positively when you're not there. So let's wrap this up with some action steps because I thought this is a lot of meat today. This is a lot of heavy stuff. But think about let's start with social media. Look at the last 30 days of your social media activity. Um, Maybe you haven't posted anything. Maybe you built a LinkedIn profile and you just kind of let it sit there. Maybe you've been really active on LinkedIn. Look at the last 30 days of content that you've been posting. Was your motivation to get likes and comments and shares? Was it about meeting the needs of a general audience, or were you speaking specifically to your key stakeholders? Were you talking about what keeps them up at night, what excites them, what might make them want to learn more about you? Do an audit of your last 30 days of social media. Next, meet with a stakeholder, or maybe you did recently, and consider what is it they need to know about me and what is it they need to feel. Dial that up. You may not get all the way dialed up, but just start paying attention to that. What do they need to know? What do they need to feel? Because if all you're doing is talking about your competencies and your experience and your certifications and your track record, but you're not meeting them where they need to feel something, that emotional side, then you've missed it. So if you've had a recent meeting with a stakeholder or you're about to, start documenting that, start paying attention. And then, look at your networking strategy. Look at the people that you know, the people that are in those categories. Do you know enough people? Maybe you need to grow that. Maybe all the people you know are information sources, or maybe you just know everybody's a cheerleader, right? They don't have any value to your career other than that support. Well, then you can be proactive about building those relationships with the people who are going to round out your career. You can be more strategic and intentional because the people that you need to know are the people you should spend time with. It doesn't mean we don't care about everybody, but that's really hard to do on a day-to-day basis. And it also then kind of leads into that, I want everyone to like me. I want everyone to find me charming and funny and relevant, and not everybody will. So I'm even saying the people past the peripheral, right? The people who really don't intersect with your career at all. Yeah, it'd be great if they like you, if they think you're valuable, if they're going to talk positively about you, but they're not your focus. They're not your focus. And that's okay. This is your career we're talking about. This is your ability to build influence, to be seen and heard and respected and given the opportunities and the resources and the connections and all the things you're looking for. Relationships are tricky. Personal relationships, professional relationships, they're complicated, they're messy, they're amazing, they're beautiful, they're loving, they're all these different things. And that's what makes social connection and the human advantage so powerful. So don't just show up as someone who's in the room. Don't just show up in the conversation. Be the person no one can afford to lose. Be the person who doesn't just work hard, but who delivers output. Be the person who knows the right people in the right way. Be the person that others want to talk about positively when you're not there. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation. It's one of my favorite topics. I love diving into this when I teach and when I work with clients, because so many of us didn't grow up with this kind of framing. So it's kind of like learning a set of new skills. Leave me comments. If you liked this podcast, please like and subscribe. Those little things actually mean a lot to us. And I do look at those. And until I see you next time, I wish you health, happiness, and all good things.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lida Citroën Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show and leave a review. It helps more people discover these inspiring conversations. For more tools, insights, and resources, visit Lida360.com or connect with Lida on LinkedIn. Until next time, remember, your influence has the power to make a real difference.